Everything began on Wednesday, August 22nd, 2012, on a day that appeared completely ordinary from the outside. In Dublin, a 36-year-old childcare worker named Elaine O'Hara left her apartment and quietly stepped into what would become the final chapter of her life. There were no alarms raised at that moment, no sense of danger in the air. To anyone who might have passed her on the street, Elaine looked like countless other people starting a normal day. Yet those who truly knew her would later remember that they felt an unshakable unease when she failed to come home. Elaine had lived for many years with mental health struggles. She was sensitive, emotionally vulnerable, and at times deeply withdrawn, but she was also resilient. She had survived periods of darkness that many never see. Despite her challenges, Elaine was not someone who had given up. In fact, she was looking forward. She had begun making plans for the future, talking about returning to education and pursuing her long-held dream of becoming a teacher. To her family, these plans mattered deeply. They were signs that Elaine wanted to live, not disappear. When she vanished that Wednesday, concern spread quickly. Hours passed, then days. Her phone went unanswered. Her absence felt wrong. Eventually, her car was found abandoned near Shanganagh Park. The keys were still inside. There were no signs of a struggle, no damage, no blood, nothing that suggested violence. The scene offered no explanation. For many, especially those aware of Elaine's mental health history, a frightening conclusion began to form. Some feared she may have taken her own life. For more than a year, Elaine O'Hara was officially classified as a missing person. Her family lived in a state of suspended grief, trapped between hope and dread. Each passing month brought silence instead of answers. There were no credible sightings, no ransom demands, no witnesses who could say what had happened after Elaine walked into that park. Ireland is not a country where people vanish easily, and the case troubled both the public and the police. Yet despite extensive searches and repeated appeals, the mystery refused to break. Everything changed in September 2013 when the truth surfaced in the most devastating way imaginable. Near Killicky, at the foothills of the Dublin Mountains, a woman walking her dog made a discovery that would end the long uncertainty. Scattered across the forest floor, partially concealed by undergrowth, were human bones. The location was remote, quiet, and unforgiving. Gardaí sealed off the area, and forensic teams began a meticulous search. The remains were fragmented and spread out, suggesting deliberate attempts to conceal or destroy evidence. Dental analysis soon delivered the confirmation the O'Hara family had feared. The remains belonged to Elaine. Her disappearance was no longer a mystery of absence. It was now a homicide investigation. Yet even with this discovery, clarity remained elusive. The condition of the remains made it impossible to determine the exact cause of death. There were no clear signs pointing directly to a suspect. Once again, questions outnumbered answers. Then came a development so unexpected that it reshaped the entire investigation. During an unusually dry period, water levels of the Vartry Reservoir in County Wicklow dropped significantly. As the mud along the shoreline was exposed, local fishermen noticed objects glinting beneath the surface. What initially looked like debris soon drew police attention. Garda divers were brought in, and what they recovered would become one of the most important collections of evidence in Irish criminal history. Among the items pulled from the reservoir were Elaine O'Hara's house keys. But alongside them were far more disturbing objects: knives, handcuffs, and 2 mobile phones. The implication was immediate and chilling. These items had not ended up there by accident. Someone had deliberately thrown them into the water, believing they would never be found. The phones had spent over a year submerged, yet digital forensic experts managed what many would have thought impossible. They extracted data, recovered deleted messages, and reconstructed communication histories. Thousands of messages emerged from the devices, messages that revealed a hidden world Elaine had kept secret from almost everyone in her life. The messages exposed a long-term relationship Elaine had been involved in with a man she met online. It was not a conventional relationship. It was framed as a dominant and submissive dynamic, and master and slave arrangement that quickly revealed extreme psychological manipulation and escalating violence. Elaine's vulnerability was unmistakable in her words. The power imbalance was severe. What had once been portrayed as consensual fantasy revealed itself as coercion. The man on the other end of those messages was Graham Dwyer, a successful and well-known architect from the affluent Dublin suburb of Foxrock. To the outside world, Dwyer was respectable, educated, and stable. He was married. He was a father. He built a career based on precision and control. But behind closed doors, the digital evidence painted a far darker picture. Investigators concluded that Dwyer had exploited Elaine's fragile mental state to fulfill violent sexual fantasies. His messages showed fixation, domination, and a disturbing preoccupation with stabbing women. The contrast between his public image and his private communications was stark. He was not simply engaging in role play. He was manipulating, isolating, and ultimately preparing. From this point on, the investigation became a masterclass in digital tracking. Gardaí analyzed cell tower data linked to the phones recovered from the reservoir. They mapped movements, signal pings, and timelines. On the evening Elaine disappeared, both her phone and Dwyer's secret phone were shown to be moving together toward the Dublin Mountains. This contradicted Dwyer's account of his whereabouts. To strengthen the case, investigators examined Dwyer's work records and even data connected to his hobby of flying model aircraft, which used GPS tracking. Those GPS records placed him precisely in the Killicky area at critical times. The convergence of evidence was overwhelming. It became clear that Elaine's death was not spontaneous. It had been planned. Prosecutors would later argue that Dwyer lured Elaine to the mountains under the pretense of a secret meeting. Isolated from help, she was murdered. Her body was dismembered, and her remains scattered to delay discovery and identification. Her belongings were thrown into the reservoir in a calculated attempt to erase her existence. In 2015, the case went to trial and gripped the nation. The courtroom became a place where modern technology met human darkness. Jurors listened as experts carefully explained how phones remember movements, how messages persist even after deletion, and how data can silently witness a crime. The defense attempted to argue that the relationship was consensual and that the evidence was circumstantial. But the digital trail was relentless. On March 27, 2015, the jury returned its verdict. Graham Dwyer was found guilty of the murder of Elaine O'Hara and sentenced to life imprisonment. Years later, Dwyer attempted to overturn his conviction by arguing that the use of phone data violated European privacy laws. The case reached European courts, but the conviction ultimately stood. Today, Dwyer remains behind bars. Elaine O'Hara remains a name that Ireland remembers with sorrow and anger. Her case stands as a stark reminder that danger does not always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it hides behind screens, messages, and respectable faces. And sometimes it is technology itself that refuses to let the truth stay buried. Elaine left her home on what seemed like an ordinary Wednesday. She never came back, but the digital traces she unknowingly left behind spoke when she could no longer speak. And through them, justice was finally served.